Welcome to chapter 41.1, or excuse me, 41.2, doing Bill Clinton's legacy all the way through owning Iraq. So Bill Clinton left office in 2001. The election in 2000 was there to replace him. He left with a budget surplus. Seen as largely a success as president by many, except for the Monica Lewinsky scandal. People in America freaked out because a supposed computer bug, Y2K, was going to end the world. Programmers, to save time, had put in the 1900 part of a lot of the programs before, and then all you had to do was enter 89 or 92, and they thought computers would reset to 1900 in 2000, and then it would shut everything down. The power would go away, planes would fall out of the sky, dogs would just be let loose. Chaos. In fact, I went to Aspen for New Year's that year to celebrate, and if anything went down, I was going to loot a Bentley or something, which probably wouldn't work as a Y2K. Microsoft worked on it. Maybe it was just a big excuse to sell program software, and it never came to fruition. But the election of 2000 was an interesting one, which we'll talk about here shortly. So his legacy, Clinton was mixed. William Jefferson Clinton, or if you watch The Simpsons, Clinton. He had sound economic policies, but the scandal overshadowed his legacy. And I alluded to, the official portrait had the shadow of Monica Lewinsky's dress kind of hanging in it, which overshadowed some of the good things that Clinton did. His vice president, Al Gore, former Tennessee senator, ran for president. Al Gore, who supposedly, or actually did once claim to invent the internet, ran against the Texas governor, George W. Bush. Al Gore tried to run on Clinton's achievements, but he also tried to distance himself from the scandals, not involved with the Monica Gate and all that stuff. His running mate was Joseph Lieberman, the first Jewish vice presidential candidate from a major party. It seems like every election now we're kind of saying the first this and first that in modern times, and it's America kind of coming of age and living up to that creed that all men are created equal. Like I said, the Republicans nominated former Texas governor, former owner of the Texas Rangers, and son of George Herbert Walker Bush, George W. Bush, and his running mate, Dick Cheney, who may or may not have been Dr. Evil. Kind of looks like him, I don't know. Bush promised to restore dignity to the White House, kind of really slandered Clinton and his record and his scandals and the lying and all that. But what most people remember is the Saturday Night Live spoof of the debates, in which the candidates were supposed to sum up their election or their campaign in one word. Al Gore in his spoof said that he's going to sum it up in a lockbox, which surprisingly wasn't man, bear, pig. I'm super serial, guys. But George Bush, in Saturday Night Live, played by Will Ferrell there on the right, he said strategery. and people actually thought that George W. Bush really did say strategery, which he did not. The election, both Bush and Gore campaigned on what to do with the estimated $2 trillion surplus. We went from this massive deficit and huge debt, and they went, hey, we have extra money, let's just spend it. And so that was kind of what they're going to do. That's why Al Gore wanted to put it in a lockbox and keep it safe. George Bush wanted to do tax cuts and give everyone just a big check from America to go buy stuff that's real American, like guns and food and beer and stuff like that. Don't be buying any of those TVs. They're from Japan. So Bush wanted tax cuts, smaller government. Gore wanted to help the lower classes and help Social Security, infuse that money in the lower classes, and try to stimulate everything from the bottom up. Foreign policy was barely mentioned. The Cold War is over. We don't have any enemies, so why talk about it? Because nothing's going to happen just 1 year into the election after they're elected, right? And then you have Ralph Nader, this guy. He's a consumer advocate who ran for the Green Party. He was way back in the 60s. He advocated for cars to have seatbelts. One of the reasons we have those. He also declared the Chevy Corvair, the 62 Corvair, the most dangerous car on the road. And he ran and was popular, and he stole just enough votes to make Al Gore possibly not win this election. Nader has this weird eye twitch that he just kind of always blinks, and he's very serious. But he was popular amongst, we're not talking a lot, like 5% of the country. On election night, it was very, very confusing. TV stations, they do polls, exit polls, and they try to ask people who'd you vote for. And based on those projections from different precincts, they can project who's going to win or lose the state. And there was disputed returns from Florida. So they're doing the election, and every station wants to break the news. And so I remember watching NBC, and they declared that George W. Bush would be the 43rd president of the United States. And people in Florida like, whoa, whoa, we're still counting, man. Come on. Florida was really key. This election was so close that the Electoral College, Florida could swing the election either way. Then NBC realized from further polling that they made a mistake, and so they took it back. Said, I was just kidding. George Bush isn't the president. And then like an hour later, they said, we predict Al Gore to be the president. And Al Gore's camp was like, ah. And George W. Bush's camp is saying, no, 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 no. It's still a lot of counting going on. They haven't counted all the ballots. And this is getting on past midnight at this point, and we're watching, and we're still wondering who's going to be the president. This is the new millennium. We're moving into this whole dawn of a new era. Finally, at like 2 in the morning, NBC says, we declare George W. Bush to be the 43rd president. And they celebrated, and Al Gore's camp said, oh, no, 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 no. And finally, like a half hour later, they go, we don't know. In fact, America didn't know for a good amount of time. The returns in Florida were so disputed that each side sued each other. And it was such a close election that whoever won the state would win the Electoral College. Overall, Al Gore won the popular vote. More people in America voted for Al Gore than George W. Bush. But our president's elected in 51 separate elections, one for each state, one for the District of Columbia, and you need the magic number of 270 votes to be the president, and Florida was that one. It was just right in the middle, that whoever won it was going to be the president. So like I said, naturally they hired lawyers and sued each other. There was controversy. They were waiting to count the military vote. There was people that misvoted. They didn't vote for the right person because Florida used the stupidest ballot you've ever seen. It's called the butterfly ballot. I'll show you a picture here in a later slide, in which there's candidates from each side, and then there's little things in the middle, and you had to punch out a little piece of paper, which we learned was called a chad. But people misvoted. They didn't intend to vote for who they wanted. And then the voting machines that counted them, if the little piece of paper was hanging in there, it wouldn't count it. And so they sued each other, should we count these hanging chads, these pieces of paper? And it went back and forth for a while. And finally, after 5 weeks, it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And in Bush versus Gore, the conservative courts ruled in the favor 5-4, George W. Bush is your 43rd president. And Al Gore, he went and tried to fight global warming, and he tried to search for man, bear, pig. So here's the ballot you can look at. There was a substantial amount of people that voted for Pat Buchanan in Florida, which he's a popular guy, but he wasn't who they were intending to vote for. They wanted to vote for Al Gore, and if you voted for Al Gore, you had to punch the third piece of paper down the list. A lot of people thought, well, on the left you have Republican 1, Democrat 2, punch out that second one. Now, you and I, that might not look too confusing, but remember, Florida's filled with a lot of people of substantial age, and so maybe it is confusing. They couldn't handle that. So it was just a whole mess. And so Bush takes over, kind of not with a mandate from the people. Obviously, more people voted against him than voted for him. And so, but he takes over. Here's the electoral map, and you see Florida here in the lower right. 25 votes, and the Electoral College was 271 and 266. You subtract 25 votes from Bush and add that to Al Gore. He gets the magic number 270. Okay, I was wrong. Ralph Nader didn't get 5% of the vote. He got 2.3%, 2.7% of the vote, which 2.8 million votes could have easily won Al Gore this election. And so we're moving into the millennium with a controversial election. This is the electoral map based on the counties, and it kind of shows the sea of red and how urbanized our country is becoming. The blue is major urban areas and stalwart Democratic areas, but you can just see that there's a whole sea of red. Curiously, in this election, they switched the colors. Before this, red was for Democrats and blue was for the Republicans, and they flip-flopped it. I don't know if it's a subtle jab that Republicans are rednecks. I'm not sure. But we get this whole red state, blue state thing, and it's just kind of a weird flip flop thing they did. This is the top impersonations of Silent Lives. You guys can watch that on YouTube sometime. We'll watch it in class though. So George W. Bush, like I said, he's the son of President Bush. So they called each other now that they don't say, "Hey Dad," "Hey Son." They go, "Hey 41," "Hey 43." We. He shunned his New England privileged roots from Yale to be a Texas persona. Don't mess with Texas. All right. He called himself a compassionate conservative. And did well as the governor of Texas. Like I said, he was a former baseball team owner, the Texas Rangers. He pulled American support for national health programs, and he also didn't sign the Kyoto Treaty, which was this major environmental thing, because George Bush isn't convinced global warming is actually happening. He did cut taxes by $1.3 trillion, which caused our surplus, our little money we're making to pay down the debt, to become a $400 billion deficit by 2004. But we all got checks from the government for like a couple $100. It was kind of nice. Bush never really got to put a stamp on the legacy of the United States the way he wanted, because months into office, and he took office on January 20th, 2001, excuse me. 9 months later, as you guys can see from the photograph, we were tragically attacked by Al Qaeda on September 11th. Terrorists attacked the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. 4 planes were hijacked, all bound for Europe, full of jet fuel. All hijacked, turned around. 2 hit the Twin Towers. 1 hit the Pentagon. The 4th flight, United Flight 93, the passengers re-hijacked the plane and purposely took it down in a field in Pennsylvania, saving possibly the Capitol or the White House. Most experts think that plane was heading towards Washington as well. In all, 2,973 were killed in 9/11, which was actually more than Pearl Harbor. This terrorist threat was complicated. It shocked our country. It wasn't just Americans killed. There's people from all over the world in the World Trade Center. People were glued to the television. Radio had a set playlist you had they had to play, and people were very sensitive to it. And it was really it's one of those moments in history that just grabs the attention of a whole generation, and you just know where you were. I know a lot of you students were too young to remember this. This was my 9th day as a teacher, on the job as a paid teacher, and they just don't teach you what to do when this happens. This was our generation's big event, like Kennedy's assassination, Pearl Harbor, when I was a kid, the Challenger explosion. And it was complicated because in Pearl Harbor, the Japanese did it, we go attack Japan. Al Qaeda did this terrorist threat. There's no Al Qaeda country or Al Qaedistan to go bomb or attack. Pretty soon, though, we linked Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda to this. Bin Laden, who was our former ally in fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan, had turned against us because of, our continued having troops in Saudi Arabia, and then he just saw his perceived, support of Israel, which is true, but then our perceived attack against fundamentalist Islam. So they were supported by the Taliban in Afghanistan. In class, we'll watch a bunch of these videos. You can look them up. They're shocking. Just get it out of your head. Bush did not do 9/11. That's just idiot speak. It's just dumb. Okay, you're soiling a tragic event, and you're really just kind of rubbing, the families of the loved ones who died in it, because you're just using idiocracy. You just don't do it. We'll skip these. Watch those in class. There's so many videos. And 9/11 was significant because of 9/11. Bush gave a very excellent speech afterwards, and many Americans felt he was the right man for post 9/11. And just the shock and seeing the towers fall, it still is seared in most Americans' minds. And it's just tragic. This is World Trade Center 1 that replaced the Twin Towers. It is completed now. It is finished. It's fittingly 1,776 feet tall, which represents our nation's birthday, our liberty. So, because the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1979, Al Qaeda was formed by bin Laden to fight the Soviets because they were atheists. And this was seen as a holy war, so Muslims from all over the world, fundamentalist Muslims, went to Saudi Arabia to fight the Soviet Union, which was their Vietnam, and we supported bin Laden, sent him Stryker missiles to shoot down their helicopters, and we sent them aid. This was Charlie Wilson that did this during the Reagan administration. There's a movie with Tom Hanks called Charlie Wilson's War about this. We gave him aid, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia. Then they declared jihad or holy war, which is misinterpreted. Jihad usually means holy struggle to turn away from sin, on the United States and other non-Muslims until they left the Middle East because of Desert Shield, which we have done largely, but then also our support of Israel. Bin Laden bombed the basement of the World Trade Center in 1993, didn't take the buildings down. He did a series of bombings on embassies in Africa in 1998, killing hundreds. Bill Clinton actually launched missile strikes against bin Laden and missed and killed some civilians, but they tried to kill him all the way back in the 90s. Those embassies killed 200, injured 4,500. And then in October 2000, USS Cole was attacked in Yemen off the coast of the Arabian Peninsula, killing a great number again. And so this guy was on a terrorist watch list. The problem is everyone had information on these guys. The FBI did, the CIA, local law enforcement. But because of the way our bureaucracy was set up then, they didn't share the information. So it slipped through the cracks. These pilots were trained in Florida that hijacked the planes. They were funded by Al-Qaeda. They operated their own cell. And because of this, we formed the Department of Homeland Security, which coordinates and shares vital intelligence, which hopefully can prevent more attacks. This is a little map to show where we have troops stationed across the world. And you can see that we have troops in the Middle East, a large presence. And so that's a sticking point for people. By the way, no foreign countries have military bases in our country. In particular, the Holy Land there in the middle, Saudi Arabia, and then our support of Israel really upsets fundamentalist Muslims. There's a lot of patriotism that showed after the attacks. We didn't discriminate against Muslims like we maybe did against the Japanese after Pearl Harbor. We had new tools to protect our country, like I said, the Department of Homeland Security, which coordinates counterterrorism. That's the latest cabinet position, last in the line to become president if something really bad happened. We also have the Patriot Act, which allowed the government to break basically our civil liberties and catch terrorists. They could spy on us, and people thought that was necessary to keep us safe because we didn't want to see images like we saw on TV ever again. Terrorists were housed at Guantanamo Bay, where maybe some torture was used by our government to get information, and which was controversial and made us look bad to the world when we had so much support at the beginning. So the Taliban refused to give up bin Laden, and so we invaded Afghanistan in 2001. We had a coalition of countries that did this with us: the United States, Britain, India, Germany, Turkey, Poland, Australia. October 7th, 2001, the military and the Northern Alliance began strikes on the Taliban, this fundamentalist government agents or government of Afghanistan. The capital, Kabul, fell to the alliance, and the Taliban were removed from power, and the new democracy was set up in a matter of months. And it looked like this was just a stunning success, much like Desert Storm. However, bin Laden, they could not catch, and the Taliban, they could not wipe out. Bin Laden, as you guys probably know, eluded us for over a decade. We are still involved in Afghanistan, largely because we removed troops and allowed the Taliban to come back, mainly because of our invasion of Iraq. So, Bush claimed that Iraq, Iran, and North Korea formed the axis of evil, which threatened American security. And anyone who was a threat to us, we were going to attack. We weren't going to wait to be attacked again. We would go out and do it first, unprovoked. And this was very controversial at the time. It's still controversial today, but on March 20th, 2003, the United States invaded Iraq to oust Saddam Hussein. Saddam had no ties to Al-Qaeda. Americans believed he did. We were told that he housed weapons of mass destruction. They didn't find any. Congress approved this in October 2002. Like I said, they claimed they were a threat to us, and so supposedly for the first time in American history, we attack someone unprovoked. If you've studied enough history, you know that's kind of false. Mexican-American Wars comes to mind right away. It was very controversial domestically. People really were down on George W. Bush because of it and criticized him. He wanted to create a haven for democracy in the Middle East. Saddam was ousted very quickly. The military folded. They went underground and started using guerrilla tactics and terrorist tactics. He was later put on trial for war crimes and hanged. Unfortunately, somebody took a cell phone video of it and leaked that on the internet, and there's video out there. It's pretty disturbing to see, even though it is an evil dictator. Sorry, I clicked the wrong button there. And there's Saddam when they got him. Bush, just weeks after that, flew onto an aircraft carrier, had a jumpsuit, came out and said, "Mission accomplished, war's over." We were there probably 7, 8 more years because it wasn't over. The goals and the fighting changed. So owning Iraq, post Saddam, Iraq devolved into chaos and violence. The Sunni and the Shia Muslims clashed for control of the country. The Sunni were the minority of the country, which Saddam was in charge of. The Shia, the Shiites, are more fundamentalist, traditional Muslim. They were the majority, and they wanted power. And so there was a clash. You have a religious civil war going on. You have the American backside. You have the people that were opposed to us. We deprived Iraq of its army, which led to more violence, more attacks on the Americans. And the insurgency grew when the scandal of the Abu Ghraib prison photographs broke, where Americans were torturing and mistreating prisoners from Iraq. And this is a photograph. I mean, it's a little disturbing. And the insurgency just grew and grew and grew. Al-Qaeda sent people from all the world to fight the United States in Iraq. And from one sense, George W. Bush maybe was right. Instead of Al-Qaeda attacking us here on our soil, we took the fight to them, and it attracted them when we were fighting Al-Qaeda far away from our citizens, from our civilians in Iraq. It's still controversial whether or not we should have invaded. The Shia and Sunni fighting, the counter-occupation and insurgency, the jihadist terrorism led to more casualties. Then 9/11 by 2006. They did have the first elections held in 2005. The Sunnis boycotted in fear of reprisals and turned to violence instead. The whole thing wasn't settled under George Bush. Obama was the one that kind of pulled the troops out, turned it over to the Iraqis and let them run their own country, which in a way has left the power vacuum. And now we have the ISIS, who was developed in Syria and parts of Iraq, largely because of the lawlessness that was there. We will stop there, and we'll see you next time. We're going to talk about re-electing George W. Bush, his last term, and then we're talking about President Obama.